I'm delighted to be back at the famous Saturday class at the Buddhistische Tour. I got it right that time? Okay, that's probably the last time I'm going to say it today. I don't know, I have a real block with that word. There's something weird going on there. But yes, really good to be back at this class, which seems to be fuller than last time I was here, and the last time I was here it was fuller than the time before that, so it seems to be a thing that's happening here in the tour. And I was reflecting a bit on the fact that, all our Buddhist centres are called Buddhist centres. I think this is the only Buddhist centre in our Triratna Buddhist community that's not called a centre. It's called a gate, which I think is wonderful. Actually, I think it's a really good way of describing what this place is, because obviously a gate is an entrance. You enter into something, you enter into a place, and in the Buddhist tradition, gates are very, very important. Literally, that you can see a Buddhist gate down by the Humboldt Forum. You have a brilliant reproduction of one of the gates that leads into the Sanchi Stupa, the great stupa that housed the relics of, or still houses the relics of the Buddha's great disciples. Ari Bandhu and I have been saying that we ought to go and do a puja down there sometimes. It would be good if there was a Buddhist demonstration, a love demonstration, lots of Buddhist devotion to that gate. I think that would be a really wonderful thing to do sometime. A bit of meditation, that kind of thing. It would be a really good example, I think, of what we're trying to do as a community, really trying to exemplify something. That's a dream I have. But the metaphor of the gate can also be used as an image for entering into enlightenment itself. You have these three gateways to liberation, three gateways into enlightenment, which are known as the signless, the wishless, and the emptiness. That would make a really good talk, but I'm not going to talk about that tonight, this afternoon. But yes, the gateway, and you've entered into the gate. Even if this is your first time, you've actually crossed a threshold into the realm of the Buddha, into the realm of enlightenment, and you're in the heart of the place where the gate has taken you to. We're actually in the shrine room. We have an image of the Buddha, an image of the Buddha meditating, and I like to think it's the image of the Buddha meditating immediately after his supreme and perfect enlightenment, completely absorbed in meditation. And the image is here to remind us of what our ideals are, what our spiritual ideals are. That's why the image of the Buddha is here, to constantly remind us, the community here, the Buddhist community here, that enlightenment is a living principle in their lives. And as it happens, just a few days ago we had the full moon of Vaishak, as it's called in India, in Sanskrit, Vaishaka Purnima, and that is traditionally the time when the Buddha gained enlightenment. So in India it's a public holiday. It's to celebrate the Buddha's enlightenment. My friends in India were sending me lots of messages to wish me happy Vaishaka greetings, and tomorrow we're going to be celebrating that day, just a few days late, but we're going to be celebrating what we call Buddha Day. We're going to be focusing on the Buddha's enlightenment, and I'm sure you'll be invited to come and all that if you want to come to that. It's always an important event in the Buddhist calendar. So I want to start with enlightenment. I want to start with the Buddha meditating. The Buddha was meditating under a tree, under the Bodhi tree in what's now Bodh Gaya in northern India, under this great tree. And it's said that after his enlightenment, which can't really be uttered, because enlightenment is beyond the sphere of thought, beyond subject and object, beyond thinker and thought. So it's not something that you can really utter. You can indicate it, but you can't utter it. But he had this period, the texts say, of sitting for different periods of 7 days and 7 nights, unmoving, in full lotus, meditating, enjoying, tasting the bliss of liberation. The bliss of liberation. This is the kind of first picture that we have of the newly enlightened Buddha, just sitting there, unmoving, in a state of great bliss, unbounded bliss. It's the bliss of liberation is the bliss without any boundary. There is no boundary at all to his consciousness. Tomorrow I'm going to do a little seminar on this, where it says that the Buddha's sphere, his consciousness, is endless. It's ananta. There's absolutely no blockage in any direction. So it's blissful, it's free, it's liberated. And it's very important, I think, that this blissful aspect of Buddhism is actually in play. All too often, I think, the image of Buddhism can be a bit stern, a bit analytical. I mean, the analytical side is there, the sober side is there, but there's a very, very strong tradition of bliss, of ecstasy in Buddhist practice, and certainly in Buddhist realization. There's, of course, a tremendous release of energy in enlightenment. A tremendous release of energy. Actually, in some ways, I think of the Buddha's enlightenment as continuing to emanate. The energy, if you like, of the Buddha's enlightenment, of his wisdom, of his compassion, of all the qualities of Buddhahood, is emanating and has continued to emanate down the ages through all the sort of vicissitudes of the ups and downs of Buddhist history and Buddhist tradition. Actually, it has gone on. It has gone on. It's here. You know, it's in the West. The West is one of the places where you've got strong Buddhist, well, you can't call it Buddhist revival unless there's a kind of Buddhist past that we had that we don't know about, but there's certainly a Buddhist eruption in the West. And there is in Germany, there is in Berlin. You know, there's the energy of enlightenment, the energy of the enlightened life that's in play. You know, the disciples of the Buddha are here in the community around the Buddhist tour. And you know, you're coming here and you're experiencing that. You're in touch with that, with the people here. So that energy is there. I remember the first time I went to Bodh Gaya on pilgrimage, where the Buddha gained enlightenment, where you can see a descendant of the tree of enlightenment, and there's a great sort of tower, like what they call a stupa, where the Mahabodhi temple is, the temple of great enlightenment. My sense, and in those days it wasn't as busy as it is now. It was quite shabby in those days, which I really liked. You know, I thought, oh, this is really good. That the place of the Buddha's enlightenment is really a bit shabby, a bit run down, but there was a lot of devotion, Buddhists from all over the world there, and I managed to do quite a lot of meditation around this centre of things. And the sense I had was of a kind of, I can't describe it in any other way, as a sort of fountain of energy. Fountain is a little bit, no, that's not quite right, because it was much more forceful than a fountain. It was like, you know, a pouring out of energy out of the earth, you know, affecting the atmosphere, affecting the environment. And I could see why Buddhists believed that this place was the Vajrasana, the diamond throne, the adamantine throne, the unbreakable throne, the centre of even the centre of the universe. You could see why they'd think that. Something happened here. Something happened in this place. And it's going on. The energy is in play. So I want to look at that. How is it in play? What does it look like? What does enlightenment look like? I've already said that it's beyond language, beyond description. So we've got some real problems in how we talk about it, how we refer to it. Fortunately, enlightened, from the Buddha onwards, enlightened disciples of the Buddha have given us some information. And I think it's important that we look at the life of enlightenment in terms of how that might apply to our lives here and now. What would that look like? So this is a bit of a tall order for me to go into this for anybody. I'm going to borrow from the Tantric Buddhism, a late development in India that was very influential in Tibet and Japan, Tantric Buddhism, because they talk about a sort of continuity between the unenlightened state and the enlightened state. They even talk about a sort of non-duality between enlightenment and non-enlightenment. This is perilous material in some ways, because non-duality is one of those sort of sexy things that people, subscribe to apps and with non-duality teachings, YouTube things and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of non-duality, to my mind, is really shallow, and it's entirely intellectual. It's not the true, authentic realization of living your life fully and completely in relationship to enlightenment. So we've got to be careful with this language. But definitely Tantric Buddhism talks about a continuity between what you might call ordinary experience and the experience of enlightenment. And they do this particularly by talking about the five Jinas. These are the five Buddha wisdoms, the five transcendental awarenesses. Again, it's very, very hard to talk about this. Sometimes this is translated as wisdom or knowledge. But the trouble is, as soon as we think of wisdom and knowledge, we think of someone here seeing something there. We think of a cognition. But jnana, wisdom, for the Buddha and for the Buddhist tradition, doesn't operate within that framework. It operates within an entirely different framework, non-framework, you could say. So one of the ways Tantric Buddhism talks about this very, very practically is to see, well, you have the jnana, you have the wisdom of which is associated with a particular colour, a particular set of symbols, a particular poison, even, negative state, even associated with animals, seasons, times of year, attitudes. There you have the continuity that helps you to relate to the wisdom. So I want to go through these and see if we can find a way of seeing how enlightenment could be alive in our lives, in hopefully in a sort of fairly practical way. Let's have a go. So the first wisdom I want to talk about is what's known as the mirror-like wisdom. The wisdom that is like a great mirror, a mirror that just reflects absolutely everything. So this is the first of the wisdoms I want to get at. And it's good that it comes first, because we need to see things clearly. Enlightenment is actually defined as seeing things as they really are. As simple as that. When you've practiced meditation very, very deeply, when you've practiced Buddhist ethics very, very thoroughly, when you've been part of a spiritual community for a very, very long time, when your consciousness has been completely purified, you can reflect what is. There's not going to be any sort of projection onto other people and the world around you. So you won't be seeing people in terms of what you want from them, how you would like them to be, how you're almost insisting that they are, but which they can never be, which leads to deep frustration. You see them, you see life as it is. And of course, this is where the great teachings of the Buddha come in. You see impermanence, you see insubstantiality. You see that very, very clearly. And there's nothing in you that sticks to what you're seeing. It's just as it is. It could sound as though it's objective, but the trouble is the word objective is a bit cold. You don't see coldly, you just see clearly. And there will be warmth, there will be love, there will be loving kindness, there will be metta in that. In fact, the best way I think you can see others clearly is if you dwell in loving kindness as much as you possibly can. Then you'll see others very, very clearly, because you're just stripping away, all your subjective prejudice. So first of all, there's this clear mirror-like wisdom, and this is associated with a blue Buddha, the symbol of this, named Akshobhya, whose name means the immovable, and he's associated with the East. He's associated with the dawn. So the feel of the mirror-like wisdom in some ways is, sometimes at dawn, if you're in the right mood, everything just seems really pristine. Everything is just very, very clear, kind of untouched. I remember when I used to live in India, kind of crazy India, the dawns were fabulous before anybody was around. I mean, even the Bombay streets, which could be pretty rough, even they had a kind of pristine quality in that early dawn light. Everything was clear before the kind of craziness of the pollution and everything else got going. There was just this clarity. So that's the kind of feel of the mirror-like wisdom. It's also associated with winter, if you can remember winters that are absolutely icy cold. There's just ice absolutely everywhere, diamond-like, glinting in the sun. So the quality of the mirror-like wisdom of Akshobhya is this absolute clarity and purity, absolute purity of vision. Nothing is affecting the purity of the vision. So that's the feel we need to have for this mirror-like state, everything reflected as it is. It's also very grounded, because it's associated with a mudra, a hand gesture, which is called earth touching. You're really touching the earth. You're not, getting ahead of yourself. You're really grounded. That's the fashionable word these days, isn't it? It's overused, isn't it? But it's more like the earth. And I remember somebody I met a long, long time ago. It was one of my teachers, Sangharakshita, our founder's teachers, named Chatrul Songye Dorje, a great Lama, great Nyingma Lama, one of the great meditators of the age, really one of the great Ati Yoga, Dzogchen masters, non-dual, all that pure awareness. So I managed to find him in a kind of run-down monastery, just down from Darjeeling in Tiger Hill, and I managed to find out he was there, and I was taken to see him. And he was sort of at that time, this is a very, very high Lama, he was just staying in a kind of storeroom. So I was taken to this storeroom filled with tankas and rupas. It was like the monastery storeroom. I mean, fantastic stuff. You'd never see it in an antique shop, just sort of stacked. And he was sitting there with another man. I don't know, they was giving some esoteric teaching or something, but he was just sitting on the ground by an open brazier in sort of rough wool robes. And it was like he was growing out of the earth. He looked so ordinary, like a sort of night watchman or something like that, but the earth was really coming across. And I thought, well, my goodness, this is a man really into meditation. So often in the West, when people are into meditation, they're away with the fairies. They're often on sort of, sky-like trips, and they come crashing to earth, because it's often like that, I think, in the West. People are so sort of addicted to experience. It's a sort of a boom and bust approach to spiritual life, where you have your ecstasies and then you have your crashes. Well, it's not like that. We've got to take a lead from this man, growing out of the earth, deep meditator, and actually start living in the enlightened life needs to start with this clarity and this sense of walking on the earth and being in very, very honest connection with the world around us. That's why the animal associated with the mirror-like wisdom is the elephant. You know, it's that tough, if you like, that immovable. So that's the mirror-like wisdom, to the extent that I can understand it. And then moving along, there's then the wisdom of sameness. The wisdom of sameness, the samatha jnana. This is often translated as wisdom of equality, but I think that's a bad translation. I think that's superficial. Sameness is more profound, I think. This wisdom is seeing the same quality in everything, particularly in everybody. You know, it's this deep, deep sense of, if you like, togetherness with the world around you. Very, very deep indeed. And in terms of practice, this sameness quality, it's a very kind of human state. It's that realization that every other, well, let's just start with human beings, but it extends further to all life whatsoever. But we are all fundamentally the same. You know, when you actually look into it, you know, if we were to go down deeply into our own longings, our own motivations, we would probably see that actually, I just want to be happy. I don't quite know what that would look like, but I want to be happy. I want to be protected. I want to feel safe. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to be frightened. I'd like to be treated courteously. I'd like to be treated well. All those things, all those very, very basic things before the complexity of ambition takes over, but getting down to a sort of deeper sort of sense of oneself as a living being. And the thing is, when you start doing that, you realize that each and every single human being is exactly the same. There is no difference at all. And that's what you're trying to realize in the Padmavajra. You know, that deep sameness. And, you know, in some practices they say, look, well, I'm not special. There's another kind of problem we have in the West, you know, the whole I'm a special person complex, which can get mixed up in spiritual life. You know, I'm that special person, I'm that unique person who's more enlightened than others, or I'm that unique person who can't possibly live a spiritual life. I am the great sinner, I am the great failure, you can't help me. It's another kind of conceit. It's all different versions of conceit. No. There is this profound sameness between ourselves and others that we're dissolving through this kind of meditation. None of us are that special. Or if you like, we're all special, if you want to make it more positive. So you get this evenness of response. So this is the sameness jnana. For a Buddha, this is how he naturally experiences life. The Buddha himself said, 3 things shine equally down on all. The sun, the moon, and the Buddha's teaching. I am not a bad teacher with a tight fist who holds things back. I give freely and openly to everybody. Appropriately, but to everybody. So it's the same response to everybody. So this is very much associated with generosity. The figure, the Buddha figure associated with this jnana is named Ratnasambhava, the jewel born or the one who produces jewels, and he sits with this gesture, with a completely open palm, you know, indicating a complete openness of communication, of generosity, of spirit. There's no holding back, there's no doubt. And yes, the image, the symbol for this jnana is the jewel. And abundance, you know, it's very much associated with abundance, yellow, this great abundance, and it's associated with more like the middle of the day when the sun's really shining, and the time of year is really it's kind of summer, but when things are really starting to produce, it's wonderful fields of grain, it's fruits, it's the cornucopia, it's this constant sense of bounty and giving, because you have this awareness of the sameness of everybody. You can't not give, and you're not going to give just to some person and not other people, this group and not that group. It's to whoever you meet, whoever you're with, and there's a great sense of pleasure and abundance in this. I think the image of this for me is my teacher, is Sangharakshita. When I was ordained, when I was 19, he was wearing his yellow robes. He had a kind of orange gold Tibetan shirt on. In those days he had really long hair. And on this weekend, just a weekend retreat, there was this natural giving. He not only ordained myself and a very good friend of mine, he led study throughout the weekend, led all the rituals, all the meditations, and there was this sense of ease, that this is fun. This is the life. You're not doing it for any other reason than this is just a wonderful thing to do. It's not. You're not doing it because people suffer. Not doing it even to gain enlightenment. You're doing it because this is what you do. This is the natural thing you do. I was thinking when I was beginning to think about this talk this morning, why I got involved in all this and why I lived this life. Well, I can't say that I've done it because I was searching for, I was in pain or something like that, or I had a particular problem. And if somebody were to ask me, why do you meditate? It's not to sort of cure anything. I mean, there's a lot to cure. I've got my issues. I've got ill will and all those things that I have to deal with. So the metta bhavana, to take that practice, is really important. But why I do the metta bhavana is because I enjoy loving, or to get to a point of loving. So you do it for its own sake. So this wisdom of the sameness of all things is this. It's just this abundance. The Buddha's enlightened. The Buddha didn't teach his Buddhism, his Dharma, because of how can I say? Because people say, well, it's done out of compassion. Well, in a sense it is, but he does it because he wants to express. He wants to express. There's this fullness within him that needs expression, that enriches the world, that adds to the abundance of the world. So that's the samatha jnana. All right, that's in a way a bit of a contrast, because the next jnana the next wisdom is called the wisdom of particularity. It's often translated as the discriminating wisdom, but the Sanskrit, actually when you look it up, it really emphasizes more the particularities of things. So in enlightenment, the enlightened mind, the enlightened consciousness, wisdom not only sees the sameness of everybody, but sees their uniqueness, their real particular qualities, their particular characters, and delights in that. Delights in the differences between everybody and everything, loves that. There's a curious thing, I think they go together, that when you're able to see the sameness of yourself and others, then you can really rejoice in and delight in the particular virtues, the particular qualities, the particular expressions of someone's potentiality. And this particular wisdom is associated with love. Its colour is red, rich ruby red, and the Buddha figure that it's associated with is Amitabha, who's a red Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light and infinite life, infinite creativity, you could say. And this, the time of day of this jnana is sunset, when the eyes the air is going a wonderful sort of shade of red. When I lived in Bombay, okay, say what you like about pollution, but sunsets are absolutely stunning. I'm not saying there should be pollution so you have really good sunsets, but there was this moment where sometimes I'd be waiting for a bus at rush hour because we're on the way to give a talk somewhere, and you've got all this madness of traffic, and then there's a certain moment where the air, it's not just the sky, the air goes red. Absolutely astonishing, and everything seems to be particular. And everything looks transfigured. Things that you'd think of as being ugly, they're just not ugly anymore. They're absolutely astonishing. So it's very much associated with love and red and meditation. And the time of year of this jnana is spring. It's this time of year. We're in the time of the wisdom of particularity. If you like, we're in the time of the Buddha of love. It's the time of, he's associated with passion, with raga, he's associated with the lotus flower. So we're in that time, and I think there's a sort of relationship. You can see the continuity between the experience of passion, when you're really in love with someone, and the wisdom of particularity. Do you remember being in love? Maybe some of you are in love right now, I don't know. But do you remember that feeling when you were in love? Do you remember that thing? It's been a long time for some of us. But do you remember that thing when you're in love with somebody, the beloved? You love every detail, don't you? Every last detail. The eyebrow, the eyes, the way they move, all that sort of thing is very, very particular. And there's that loving attention on them. Well, in enlightenment, that's for everybody. That's for everything. Without that desire to possess. It's that very, very fine appreciation of the particularity of someone. And of course, what this means is, what this leads to, is incredibly good teaching, incredibly good communicating, really appropriate to the person you're talking to. When the Buddha would walk into a group of people, if he was giving a Dharma talk, and there might be hundreds of people there, he had a mind that would take in everybody, absolutely everybody present. But he'd also have in mind particular people, and the teaching would direct to them. It would have an effect on them. Sometimes people who were regarded as completely sort of untouchable by everybody else. There's a famous story where a leper turns up at an assembly. He doesn't know the Buddha's teaching. He just turns up because he thinks he's going to find food there. And the Buddha surveys that group, thinks, him. He's really going to get it. He's really going to understand what I have to say, and he becomes a great disciple of the Buddha. So that wisdom of particularity, seeing people individually and clearly with love, with that kind of quality of attention. And then the fourth of the wisdoms is the all-accomplishing wisdom. You could call this the wisdom that acts, the wisdom that gets things done. This is really important because sometimes if you're talking about wisdom, you can disassociate it from action. But for the Buddha and Buddhist tradition, if you are genuinely a wise person, you do something. You actually do something. You affect the world around you. It's sort of comparatively easy, to have an understanding and to talk about your understanding, with other people. But I think it's actually rare when real understanding, which is real wisdom, actually explodes into action with others to do some good, to really bring some benefit into the world. So this all-accomplishing wisdom is associated with air. One of the things I haven't gone into this talk is all the different elements. It's associated with the wind element or the air element. It's very, very appropriate. It's this movement, if you like, that starts to affect people. The Buddha form that's associated with this wisdom, his name is Amoghasiddhi, which means the infallible success. And he's regarded as a very mysterious, deep green figure. And the whole idea of this wisdom, it's completely egoless. This activity, it doesn't draw attention to itself. It just moves through and affects people very, very profoundly. It's this natural, spontaneous almost activity of the Buddha to affect people. The time of day this is associated with is midnight. Sometimes this is called the sun at midnight. You're in a world now of the union of opposites, a world of activity and stillness. The Buddha never moves from his position of stillness, even when he's walking through the dust roads of India, the forests of India, going into the marketplaces in India to communicate to who he's with. He never moves from that, from his meditation, if you like. His meditation and his activity are one thing. The time of year associated with this jnana is kind of late summer, early autumn. It's the far north, it's forests, it's really, those forests, and it's kind of a bit steamy. The thunder's coming, you can hear the sound of thunder, everything is very, very rich, and there's a lot of mystery in the atmosphere. This is the kind of quality of Amoghasiddhi. It's sometimes said of this kind of wisdom, it's associated with a Zen tradition, the last of what are called the ox-herding pictures. It's called going into the marketplace with bliss-bestowing hands. And the image here is of an old man, a kind of old wandering man, very kind of lined, but chuckling away. He doesn't mind where he is. He doesn't mind if he's among a load of butchers, or if he's among a load of intellectuals, or if he's with religious people or non-religious people. The bliss-bestowing hands are there, creating a different world for the people that he's with. So the big point, though, is that if you're serious about the life of enlightenment, you're active. You're active. I mean, that's one of the lovely things about coming to Berlin and being with the community around this centre, around the gate, is they're active. They're really trying to do something in terms of, bringing Buddhism into the world. And what I like about it, what I like about this community generally, there are no gurus. There are no kind of charismatic leaders. We're all incredibly ordinary people, unbelievably ordinary people who just enjoy what we're doing, and we want to kind of share it with as many people as possible, as unself-consciously as possible, because we really believe in it. We really believe that this life of enlightenment can really do something to the world around us. And finally, and then I'll end, there's a wisdom that sort of gathers them all together. This is called the wisdom of the Dharma Dhatu, the wisdom of the Dharma Dhatu. This is very difficult to explain. The Dharma Dhatu means that, it's everything. Dhatu here means something like realm, cosmos. Dharma means truth or reality. So this wisdom of the Dharma Dhatu means that the enlightened being sees reality everywhere. There isn't a sense of a kind of nirvana over there and a world here. That's just not present. The Buddha never moves from his enlightenment. Whatever he's doing, wherever he is. It doesn't mean that an enlightened being is sort of exempt from the ravages of death and aging and illness, but his relationship with that is entirely different. One of the most wonderful things you can read, where you really do get a kind of insight into what enlightenment might be like, is when you read the last days of the Buddha. There's this incredible moment where he's in absolutely ghastly pain. He's 80. He's got dysentery. He's got chronic back pain. He's being overwhelmed by illness, and he decides, I'm not ready yet. So he fights for life, I'm not ready to leave yet because I want to do some last teaching. I want to do a last tour. And he goes to actually a very, very kind of out of the way place to do his last communicating. And his great disciple Ananda is very distressed at the pain he's in. And, the Buddha doesn't talk about it. He just, gets a hold of it and deals with it. But Ananda can see what's going on and says, it really distressed me. And they have this conversation. And the Buddha said, well, Ananda, look, I'm just like an old cart now. I can only go along through being strapped up. A wonderful description of being an old man. He's falling apart, but he's holding it together. He said, the only time I don't know pain is when I can enter the signless samadhi. He has that, if you like, that natural ease of getting into deep meditation where, if you like, all the features that would see things in terms of pain just dissolve away. He can sort of retreat into a higher consciousness. But he said, when I'm walking around, I'm always in pain. But I never lose mindfulness. I never lose awareness. I never lose my purpose. And of course his purpose is compassion. His purpose is to finally communicate Buddhism to the people he's with, to bring liberation to as many people as possible, even though there's pain. It's an incredible description of enlightenment. Those two aspects, he can be absorbed, but walking around when he's with people, that pain is there, but it doesn't define him in any way whatsoever. And there's a teaching there for us. We have our ups and downs, don't we? We have our really difficult periods, individually. Difficulties maybe with family members, loss, grief, and friends and so on. And people are very frightened about the state of the world, lots of suffering in the world. For Buddhist tradition, they would say, start seeing this as the Dharma Dhatu, and start by seeing absolutely everything as the place of practice. You don't be defined by the difficulties, the problems. Find a way of transforming that through meeting it with some sense of the enlightened consciousness, some little sense of not being defined by what's there and bringing something else into play. That's another story. That's for another talk where we could go through and select, all the different kind of problems we face and how we can transform them and transmute them. But they are there. They can be found. So there we are. I think that's enough on my attempt to talk about the enlightening life, the enlightened life, living in relationship to the energy of enlightenment. And I hope, above all, that it was helpful to you. Thank you.